trucks have entered between 10th of July and 1st of September. The reopening of more crossing points, the reopening of Jordanian and Egyptian routes, an increasing amount of fuel entering Gaza, the minimum agreed 196,000 litres was reached in mid-August. However, we see fluctuations in quantities entering the Strip in the last 2 weeks. On structural interventions, repairs to vital infrastructure have improved water access, and the South Gaza desalination plant is also operational. However, 3 main water pipelines suffer recurrent damages due to ongoing hostilities. And in August, a ship carrying 1,200 tons of aid departed from Limassol, Cyprus, and further shipments will continue. I would like to thank Cyprus in particular for their efforts. And I agree with you, it's not enough. It is not enough. We need to do more. I also have led a full review of Israel's compliance with Article 2 of our association agreement. We drew up an inventory of possible options to pressure the Israeli government to change its course of action. The Commission then followed with a proposal to suspend parts of Horizon, but there is no required support for that yet. And I note that this is a qualified majority decision. While there was support for these steps, there is no unity on what should come next. Now we have a statement of Famine in northern Gaza. There are major safety and security concerns for international humanitarian staff, which hinder efforts to distribute aid. Trucks are looted and aid is not distributed properly. War continues, including now in Gaza City. And so I ask you, what more can we do? Honourable members, I believe we must continue diplomatic efforts with the Israeli government because we cannot get anywhere if we do not talk. In my contacts with the foreign minister, I have consistently raised the restrictive requirements for international NGOs to register. He has informed me that the deadline for registration was now extended to December. Now we uphold European values internationally. How we uphold the European values internationally is a collective responsibility that demands a collective European response. On my side, I can reassure you that I leave no stone unturned in my efforts to make progress. I will continue this way. Our options for more action are clear and remain on the table, but Member States disagree on how to get the Israeli government to change course. That is why several Member States have now taken national measures in response to the actions of the Israeli government. But we cannot move as a union until Member States share the same view on what to do. This is not the time to point fingers, but to unite for solutions. And there are many places where we do agree. We all agree on the diagnosis and on the goals. End the suffering, end the conflict, and secure the release of all hostages. Yesterday's attack in Jerusalem underlines the incredible dangers facing both Palestinians and Israelis. Aggression breeds more aggression and radicalization. If there was a military resolution, the war in Gaza would have long been over. And now we must summon the political will to agree on a European way forward, and I call on the European Parliament's support in this endeavour. Member States' actions are crucial, but only our unity can have amplified effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker on behalf of the political group here for EPP is Antonio López Istúriz White.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta, Alta Representante.
President, High Representative, Commissioner, what we see in Israel and Palestine is not sustainable. We need a clear and responsible response from us in Parliament. First of all, human lives must be respected. International law must be respected. Suffering cannot become a political instrument in the EU, as is happening, as we see in this Parliament, as we see in this resolution, unfortunately. 6 civilians were killed by a terrorist attack in Jerusalem. One of those lives lost was a Spanish life. And what we see that is being put forward is not going to help, especially from my country. It could only further inflame terrorism. And what we see is a lot of naivety. There's naivety. Apparently there's no anti-Semitism in Europe. You know, there are Jews in Europe who have nothing to do with Israeli policy, and yet they are being persecuted in my country, in bars and restaurants and elsewhere. We see blood being shed. We see a repetition of history. We have a duty here. We must not defend governments or unilateral actions. We must defend people and the hostages who are still imprisoned by Hamas, and we must defend those children in Gaza. And we know that in Israel, in the West Bank, there is still a constant fear of violence. The EU must be an honest broker. We must act coherently. We must act with determination. Peace and prosperity and dignity for both sides, Israelis and Palestinians alike, will not happen if we continue to have hate speech. We need to focus on reconciliation and living together peacefully. Thank you.
The next speaker on behalf of S&D is Yanis Maniatis. 2 minutes, please.
Αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, δεν μας επιτρέπεται να...
Colleagues, we shouldn't just close our eyes to this humanitarian disaster in Gaza. It isn't a chance that is the outcome of the politics of Netanyahu. He is using hunger as a weapon and is conducting a crime against humanity and a genocide just to stay in power. 100,000 Israelis are demonstrating every day against this policy. It's clear that the Prime Minister of Israel isn't interested in peace or an end of the conflict. The hostages would then come back to Israel. It's a one-sided policy which he is continuing, and despite the international reaction, illegal settlements are being extended on the West Bank, and the two-state solution is being torpedoed. The European Union shouldn't delay any. We should have a resolution passed on Thursday, the cessation of all hostilities, the condemning the use of hunger as a war crime, as a crime, and humanitarian aid must be provided. Thirdly, based on the report of the European Commission, the infringement of human rights during the conflicts must be stated, and then the settlement should be condemned, and those behind the settlement policy, and then the two-state policy and the recognition of Palestine must be advanced. On Thursday, we must prove that we're in favour of human rights throughout the world. That is the measure of our humanity.
Is Antonio Tanger Correa for PFE, please. 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, Madam Kallas, well, everybody speaks about Israel and the surrounding problems. Today I'm going to speak about Hamas, the other side, because the conflict has two sides. Hamas is a terrorist organization recognized by all countries represented here. Hamas must be held accountable if it refuses to release hostages and shoot them at point blank in a cold way, and refuses to disarm and deliberately steals and blocks food aid meant for civilians. Hamas is not a partner for peace, it is an obstacle to peace. All countries, nations, or institutions that provide Hamas with manpower, weapons and money should be considered as terrorism supporters. And let's say one thing here. If they want the war to end tomorrow, it's just to release the hostages and put the weapons down, and in 24 hours there will be no more war in Gaza, I can guarantee you. The other thing is recognizing the Palestinian state. It's very nice. What are you going to recognize? The Gaza Strip, the West Bank, where the most corrupt government takes over, and they don't have a geopolitical continuity. They hate each other. Abu Mazen is hated as Netanyahu by the Palestinians. Now, one thing is, if you want to create a state, you must have elections, you must have a parliament, and you must have a government. And who's going to be the government? Hamas or its proxies. I leave this thought with you. The other thing is Jordan. 60 to 70% of the people living in Jordan are Palestinians. Remember the Black September in 1970, and once you give them the statehood, they will say, we national Palestinians, we want to be in this country because it's our country. It means to destroy Jordan. Thank you very much.
Speaker on behalf of ECR is Bert-Jan Ruyssen.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Beste collega's, aan ieder die vandaag...
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, to all those who once again are blaming Israel for everything, I have a question for you. Have you forgotten the 7th of October and what preceded it? The years of rockets and incendiary bombs raining down on Israel from Gaza. Have you forgotten that? And Hamas's mission, the total destruction of Israel. I'm not saying that Israel has not made any mistakes, but if we lose sight of the murderous nature of Hamas, I feel that we'll be making the wrong choices. Then we'll be offering solutions that turn out not to be solutions at all. For instance, recognizing a Palestinian state when all that would do is keep Hamas in power longer. Dear colleagues, that is not how you achieve peace. Anyone who really wants to contribute to peace should focus on three things: the immediate release of the hostages, the dismantling of Hamas, and generous humanitarian aid and protection for the civilian population in Gaza. And in this regard, Israel certainly has a major responsibility. As for the sanctions against Israel, I think that's not the right way to go. It sends the wrong message. That should be taken into consideration only as something that would indicate support for Hamas. No to sanctions.
Is Willy Zövendal. Oh, sorry. Sorry. It was my fault. Renew, Hilde Woutmans. Sorry.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter, collega's. We hebben hier al wat partijen juist gehoord.
Colleagues, we've just heard from various parties, and we've got negotiations this afternoon, and some only want to talk about the 7th of October, some just want to talk about the terrorist attacks, and yet some don't want to talk about Israel at all. But I have a plea to you. Parties have to talk to each other. It's the first time that the UN has said that there is famine in Gaza. Not just a famine, but a man-made famine. Millions of children are at risk of dying. But there are lorries full of food at the borders, but these lorries are being blocked from coming into the country. And some people are dying because they're rushing towards the humanitarian aid just to grab a few pieces of bread. Miss Kaja Kallas has already taken action. She's taken more action than her predecessors. And yet, let me say what is indispensable. We need to open up all of the borders without any further hesitation. And Hamas must free the hostages. And we need to impose sanctions. Dear colleagues, we need to have sanctions against terrorists, but also against Israel and against ministers, Israeli ministers, who are stamping on international law. And just give me a couple more seconds. Let's also recognize a Palestinian state. That's all that we can do. We need to have a two-state solution. A two-state solution is the only way forward, and that's what we're calling for. This afternoon, please vote in favor of this resolution.
Respect next time to your group leaders to get more speaking time. It's not up to us. So the next speaker is Willy Servendaal.
Thank you, Chair. Jeg er altid så imponeret over de her debatter.
In this debate, we have the far right is not able to talk about the pain that the Palestinian people are exposed to. Israel is punishing an entire people for the atrocities committed by terrorists. They're using hunger as a weapon. They are carpet bombing hospital, tent camps and schools. They're bombing children. None of this can be excused by biblical quotations or self-defense. The EU countries and the EU have a great responsibility, therefore, to stop these war crimes. It's embarrassing that we have not been able to hold them accountable. We have influence, and we should use it much better than we are now. It's necessary, therefore, to have sanctions. It's also important to suspend the trade agreement, which is the really effective means we have vis-à-vis Israel. There's no doubt that Israel is violating human rights. We have the word of the international legal system that what is happening is a breach of human rights. It's not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. I still believe in the two-state solution with internationally recognized borders from 1967. That's the only viable solution for both peoples. But this first requires that we secure the Palestinians' right to survive. And if you want to have a two-state solution, you also have to recognize a Palestinian state. Thank you.
Much. The next speaker is Manon Aubry on behalf of the left.
700 jours.
700 days. That's how long it took the genocide in Gaza to finally see a resolution coming from the European Parliament. Over 700 days, the majority of the groups here refused all of our demands and closed their eyes to the worst humanitarian massacre our century has known. And it's only thanks to the left, who never ever let go of this issue, that the Parliament is finally doing something about this. You had to wait for the UN to declare famine and speak out against the genocidal actions led by Netanyahu. Only after humanitarian aid trucks were blocked, only after over 6,000 civilian children being massacred, only after 200 journalists being murdered, only after Netanyahu has decided to move his genocidal project to the West Bank, for this Parliament finally to try and tackle the genocide in Gaza. But let's be clear. We don't want to see vague condemnations coming out of this House. We want to see action, Ms. Kallas. What are you waiting for? We want to see an embargo when there are on weapons, when France has delivered a record number of weapons to Israel. What are you waiting for to do something about the association agreement with Israel when you have recognised that human rights were violated? What are you waiting for to provide diplomatic protection to the Sumud Solidarity Flotilla en route with humanitarian aid to Gaza? And the hundreds of people in the crew in that flotilla have shown that they have more courage than you, Ms. Kallas, and more courage than the European leaders. 700 more days won't cut it. We cannot wait that long. The people of Gaza will no longer be there at that time. They have nothing. No shelter from bombs, no food to eat, no hospitals to dress their wounds, no land to try and bury their dead, and no tears to cry over their dead. They have nothing left. But you, Ms. Kallas, the leaders of Europe, you've lost something that the people of Gaza still have, their morality and their humanity. History has its eyes on you. Take action now before it's too late.
Der nächste Redner, stellvertretend für die...
The next speaker on behalf of the ESN is Alexander Sell. For 1 minute. There has been 1.6 billion euros paid by the EU to Palestine, including German funds. This is after what happened. And without our funds, there could be no food in Palestine. There's no production in Palestine anymore. 2/3 of food is imported. And what we have seen is that there's been an explosion of the amount of people in Palestine. There are 2.3 million people living in Palestine. That's a doubling in 25 years. There is a real increase in the population in Palestine. Every woman is having 3 to 4 children. I admire the Palestinians for having so many children. I wish that we could afford to have so many children here too. We need to stop these payments to Palestine because it's German taxpayers' money that is earned by Germans. I want young Europeans to dare to marry and have a family. We need to invest in our own future and not in a Palestinian baby boom.
Blue card or... The next speaker is Hildegard Bentele. 1 minute.
President, dear Vice President, dear colleagues, after more than 700 days of war, Israel and Gaza may be entering the final phase. The complete defeat of Hamas military wing and hopefully the liberation of the last 20 hostages, including at least 7 Europeans. The EU has no boots on the ground, no role in the ceasefire talks, and no seat at the table for Gaza's political future. But we do have a responsibility where we can act, and this is improving the humanitarian situation. More aid is needed. Humanitarian zones must be real, and all actors must cooperate. Politically, we must set clear boundaries, no deportations, no annexations, no new settlements, but a chance for a terror-free and prosperous Palestinian state. And finally, we should help Israelis and Palestinians rebuild trust, something we as EU know from our own history of peace after war.
Do you accept a blue card from Mr. Sieper? Mr. Sieper, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to react on the answer of Ms. Bentele in accordance with our rules of procedure. Thank you, Ms. Bentele, for accepting the question. I've been following your position on the situation quite close, and I also saw that you visited the German-Israeli Summer Festival in Berlin just a few days ago. I take that your support for Israel stems from the right of Israel to exist, which is enshrined in our German national ideals. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, does this also include the necessity to protect Israel from its internal enemies and not only its external enemies?
Ich darf jetzt auf Deutsch.
I will answer in German. We recognize that Israel is a democracy where the people can choose their government, when they can make their decisions. To that extent, it's difficult, as it is for others, to criticize the military action in Gaza, because we don't have a defense minister. You say we can't solve crises militarily. I don't know. The Israelis are solving this crisis militarily by removing the weapons of Hamas. I think it would be a good idea if we had a future without the Hamas military. So I hope we'll soon be at the end of this. They have 40 to 50% of Gaza City, and I hope that it soon ends. Thank you. We can't have a further reaction, Mr. Zieper, because that's not allowed by the rules of procedure. A blue card is a blue card.
Nacho Sanchez Amor.
Gracias, Presidenta. El aluvión.
Thank you, President. A whole barrage of words over Gaza is now becoming an obstacle to action, an alibi for inaction, if you will. We need to move away from simply describing the horror to taking action. We need to move away from this doublespeak. It's very important that we call a spade a spade. Let's try that in our resolution today. Because this is not just about the lack of credibility that we will be suffering from in the years to come in our relations with the global south. This is affecting how our own citizens see us, with those relentless images being shown on the news. We need to call out evil. Just think back to what Hannah Arendt said about the banality of evil. It's important to name things. That's why we need to explicitly state that this is a genocide. We need to call out those responsible for the war crimes. We want to see sanctions, an embargo. We want to see an end to the association agreement and liberation of the hostages. Thank you.
Didn't allow the question and answer and question and answer. It's because we are running strictly out of time. We are already with a huge delay from the first debate, and as we have a guest at 12 o'clock, we have to stop in time, and that's the reason why I allow blue card, but not a second blue card to the same question like it is foreseen. It's the same with the catch the eye. I closed the catch the eye because we are already late. And now I give the floor to Fabrice Leggeri from PFE.
For 700 days, 48 people have been held hostage. Some have been released, some are believed to be dead. And we must not forget their plight. But what is Europe doing? Europe is talking, but into a vacuum. Look at King Lear. Lots of great speeches, but very little action. Europe wants to be powerful, but it is not. In this time, we continue to see famine in Gaza. We must aid civilians. We must not support a terrorist organisation. We have a lot of resolutions that we vote on here, and there's no action. Others, on the other hand, do take action, and we are becoming a laughingstock because of our impotence. We have to look to the long term and the two-state solution, but we can't have Hamas at the head of this state. So policy is not about words. Policy is about action. Action which will protect innocent people, free hostages, and which will ensure the security of Israel. Thank you very much, Madam President.
There is Alberico Gambino from ECR.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. High Representative. In Gaza, the suffering of the civilian population is shouting out to the world that this war must come to an end. We need to find a pathway forward to peace. But we know, too, that peace cannot be built with slogans. We need security and safety for Israel. We need the hostages to be released. We need to be brave enough to tell a new story that will not feed into hatred and dehumanization, as the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem pointed out. We must support Israel's right to defend itself from terrorism, but we must ensure too that we call for the protection of the population of Palestine, and we must call too for humanitarian corridors. We cannot stay silent in the face of the suffering of Christian communities who have been caught in the spiral of violence. We must work for the balance in the region. Europe cannot and must not come out with mere statements, and Italy is willing to play its part. Two peoples, two states. We must work to move forward to a lasting peace. Thank you.
Is Ben Andrews in you?
Thank you, President, High Representative and colleagues. Last month, Major General Haliva of the IDF said, for every one person killed on October the 7th, 50 Palestinians must die. A leak from the IDF last month also revealed a civilian death rate of 83%. International humanitarian law is clear. Civilians must never be a target of war. This is something that used to bother Israel. Back in 2002, the head of the legal unit of the IDF said, and I quote, "I was present when we diverted a missile because we saw that a target standing on a roof had picked up a child. We had one clear rule. We could never approve of killing children. And now we have 50,000, more than 50,000 children killed or injured in Gaza. This is something that Israel used to agonize about the legal and moral implications of civilian deaths. So I implore those who consider themselves true friends of Israel, to recognise that this is no longer in any way defensible. Thank you.
The next speaker is Hannah Neumann.
Dear colleagues, famine has reached Gaza City. People are told to leave but have nowhere to go. Children are starving, families are bombed. And while Trump and Netanyahu dream of turning Gaza into Riviera, the European Union is paralysed by shameful infighting. While we debate, they create facts on the ground. And yes, it's above all the German government that blocks action in the Council. That is unacceptable. Because if we are serious about ending the suffering, about offering a real alternative to the Trump-Netanyahu alliance, we must stand united and with our regional partners and with the hundreds of thousands in Israel demonstrating for an end to this brutal war. The Israeli government has promised again and again to let in more humanitarian aid. Before the summer, High Representative Kallas, you announced another such deal, but people in Gaza are still starving. Isn't it time to suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement then? For months, Israeli ministers have incited violence and pushed new settlements to bury a two-state solution. Isn't it time to sanction them then? So instead of shouting at each other in here, let's unite behind a simple truth. From the river to the sea, all people should be free. Free from hunger, free from bombs and missiles, free from hostage-taking and terror attacks, free from repression, anti-Semitism and racism, free to love, live and to raise their children in peace.
Is Mark Butenga.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, Madame la Haute.
President, High Representative, dear colleagues, if there is one thing that's clear, it's that our moral compass in Europe is not to be found here anymore. The moral compass is in the hands of the hundreds of thousands of European citizens who are taking action against European inaction and complicity. Complicity with what's happening in Gaza. It is a genocide that we can all see, apart from a few of you, who continue to support Israel. In fact, the EU continues to support Israel with hundreds of millions of euros, with weapons. We support massacres. So imagine you go to school and say, I'm going to kick everyone. And then I'm not just going to kick people, I'm going to turn down the school, I'm going to tear down the hospital. Can I give you some bullets? Can I give you some weapons? Now, Ms. Kallas, you said that you spoke to the Israeli minister to provide humanitarian aid. Well, did you raise the famine? Well, since you reached the agreement with the Israeli minister, there's been a famine. A famine has come to Gaza.
Nikolaou Alvanos.
Χωρίς τέλος είναι οι θηριωδίες του κράτους κατακτητή.
The atrocities of the occupying state are endless. The dead are countless. Over 63,000 dead, including almost 20,000 children. That's Israel, the strategic partner of the EU, the New Democracy government and the parties that enhanced their cooperation with it. The premeditated operation to level and annex Gaza, generalise settlements in the West Bank and inhumanely displace the Palestinian people aimed to prevent the creation of an independent, free, viable Palestinian state in order to promote the plans of the monopolies. We denounce the US ban on the Palestinian delegation entering the UN. And the EU continues to back Israel and cooperate with it, while pretending to be concerned about the famine. Your hypocrisy is provocative. The peoples of Europe are expressing their solidarity en masse against the repression, and workers are blocking Israeli military cargo at ports. They're calling for an immediate end to the genocide and occupation, the criminal blocking of humanitarian aid and all cooperation with Israel. They're demanding recognition of the Palestinian state within the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital.
Frau Präsidentin, High Representative, commissaris, collega's. Oorlog is gruwelijk. Colleagues,
Krieg is terrible. war crimes against journalists and others are unacceptable. There are terrorists who use citizens as human shields. That isn't a genocide. Where is the proof for genocide? Israel is providing aid, is evacuating children. If you talk about genocide, is guilty themselves. It's anti-Semitism. On the 7th of October, Hamas carried out a bloody pogrom and has a plan to use civilian targets for political ends. And we want to reward that by recognizing Palestine. You must support the peace plan of the Arab League. Hamas must release all hostages and hand over its weapons. We should build peace. That should be our goal. Thank you.
Mr. Botenga, 30 seconds.
No. Okay. You have just accused us of the most horrible things. You should be ashamed. Let me ask you, what are your sources? The International Court of Justice has spoken about a plausible risk of genocide. The International Association of Genocide Scholars, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, Palestinians on the terrain, Israeli NGOs, and even Israeli genocide scholars and Holocaust experts. So what are your sources? Who are you to deny the genocide? What is it, like, trust me bro? That's not going to work here. Do better.
Monsieur Botenga, dit is een typische linksextremistische...
Mr. Botenga, that's a typical extreme left way of putting it. There is no international consensus. There's no international judgment of from a court. What about Sudan? 150,000 dead in Sudan. 11 million people displaced. It's 26 million people threatened by famine. Nobody's talking about that. That looks...
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sì, volevo anch'io tornare sulla parola genocidio.
I too wanted to go back to this word, genocide.
La Convenzione per la prevenzione.
The Convention for the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide is the legal basis. And that's what we use when examining what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. And we've concluded, like all organisations mentioned by our colleague Mr. Botenga.
Is the wrong language? You can switch it up there on the...
Maybe the volume.
Okay. Perhaps start again.
Okay, volevo dire all'onorevole che la base...
Yes, the legal basis for which we, and indeed the organisations cited by Mr. Botenga, use to state that there is a genocide. The document that we use for that is the Convention for the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide, 1948. This is not something from a Facebook page. It's very serious. And when you look at what's happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, well, it's quite clear that the act of genocide is being committed there. And there is a will to ethnically cleanse the area, as expressed by an Israeli minister. So have you ever read that document from 1948, the Convention on the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide? Thank you.
Dank u wel. Natuurlijk, of course I've read the document. And we should not...
Of course, I've read that document.
...to a political instrument as you do, because as you know, we have seen acts, I told it, food deliveries, evacuation of Gazan children through Eilat to Italy. That's what Israel is doing as well. And genocide requires genocidal intent to be proven. So you think that evacuating Palestinian children to Italy for treatment can be reconciled with having a genocidal intent? Then you make a laugh, and then you are really insulting the victims of real genocides, like the Armenian genocide and the Shoah. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Kathleen van Bremt.
Dank u wel. Ik moet eerlijk zeggen, ik heb toch plaatsvervangende schaamte voor deze tussenkomst.
I think that was shameful to hear that from the EPP. I wish you all the success in the world for the negotiations later on. It won't be easy, and I think it's time for us to finally have a serious resolution in this Parliament, and we need to take action. The Commission is hiding behind the Council. The Council is hiding behind the Council. Everyone's hiding behind unanimity. But who can't hide? The Palestinians in the occupied territories. Let's act. Let's impose sanctions, suspend this association agreement, suspend Horizon support for Israel, and stop selling weapons. You know, there was a weapons trade fair where there continued to be sales. You know, we're buying from Israeli companies as well. We're not going to give money to Israeli companies to buy weapons from them, are we? It's really time to act. Mr. Smith, international law means that we need to act. If you turn a blind eye to genocide, then you are violating international law and you are co-responsible. I've had enough of excuses.
A March 2024 poll revealed a shocking fact. 71% of Palestinians support Hamas' horrific terrorist attack on October 7th. And 59% believe that armed struggle is the best way forward. These are not fringe views. They are a majority in a society based on fanatical Islamism and support for terrorism. Every Arab country knows this and recognizes it. That's why neighboring countries such as Egypt, Jordan, or Lebanon, or even the rich Arab oil states of the Gulf have not taken any of these Palestinian extremists. But in Europe, the naivete is without limits. Denmark has already seen the consequences. In 1992, 321 stateless Palestinians were granted residence by special law. Today, the results are clear. 74% live on welfare. 57% have criminal convictions, and for the children, the stats are even worse. This is not humanity. This is a generational betrayal. Europe must finally learn importing radicalized people means exporting security and prosperity for the next generations.
The next speaker, we have a blue card from Catarina Vieira. Do you accept it?
Dear colleague, you say this is not humanity. You just call all Palestinians extremists. Is it humanity to call extremists the 55,000 or more children who have been killed or injured in this horrible genocide? Where is your humanity? How dare you call an entire nation extremist?
The polls define it as extremist when you support horrific acts of terrorism. But I can't bear any more of your hypocrisy on the left. There are genocides committed many places in the world, but it is only when it is the Jewish state, the only Jewish state in the world, the state of Israel, that you care. You even walk in demonstration in capitals like my own in Copenhagen with Palestinians using the Nazi salute. How can people from the SND group, from Renew and other places accept that kind of fanaticism in a cause you claim is carried out in the name of humanity? I'm appalled.
Then here's another blue card from Eric Marquardt. Do you accept that too? And I declare this moment that it is the last time that I accept 2 blue cards for one person because we are really running out of time. Please, Mr. Marquardt.
Yes, thank you. Just because you're talking about hypocrisy, you were quoting polls which were done in Gaza. And do you believe that Hamas is an organization which accepts scientific freedom, free press and polls? Because in the end, you would rely on numbers which are based on Hamas propaganda maybe, or so do you believe that the polls are trustful if they are done in Gaza at the moment, which the Hamas government is governing?
No, I generally don't tend to believe Hamas, neither when they claim how many victims there are, when they decide how many of them are combatant and non-combatant, because I do not, in general, put my trust in terrorist organizations. But I recognize, just like you can in an autocracy like Russia, you can have polling done in a population, even though it lives in an unfree society. Just as well as we can today see how Germans felt about the Nazi regime in the 30s, if you look at the historical sources for that. So no, I don't believe that you can just pick and choose the facts. So believe Hamas when it comes to the number of dead children, and not when it comes to the support in the general population. You have to pick a side.
The next speaker in our debate is Joachim Stanislav Rudinsky.
Bardzo dziękuję, pani przewodnicząca.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Commissioner. In the face of this huge drama, the war of Israel and Hamas, the unspeakable suffering that is inflicting millions of civilian people, death, deportations, starvation, lack of basic necessities, the opening of hell gates announced by Israel. This shows what hatred breeds, and yet they all invoke the same father, the biblical Abraham. In the face of the tragedy of the war of those who profess Islam and Judaism, and now we have massive suffering of the Christian population. The Catholic Church of the Saint Family in the center of Gaza was bombarded by Israel, but Islamic extremists also attack Christians, and this is like a long-standing heritage of suffering and multi-religious nature of Jerusalem has been consigned to the past. There won't be any peace without the invocation of the Judeo-Christian sources.
Bernard Guetta.
What did the murderers want in Jerusalem yesterday? They say that they wanted to avenge the deaths in Gaza, the bombings, the hunger, and the destruction of towns, villages, schools and hospitals. But what did they want to avenge? The bloody, barbaric act of the 7th of October and the holding of hostages which followed? We see that there is absurdity. This whole tragedy is just imbecilic and pointless. Vengeance just leads to further vengeance. And let's look at our role. We are not in favour of Israel or in favour of Palestine. We are in favour of peace. We have to hammer it home again and again. There is no solution except a two-state solution. We have to say no, no. If you say no, 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 then, you know, if you say no to that and you say that it's a utopia, then you are giving up on hope.
After
23 months of genocide, yesterday we held a minute's silence for Gaza. And as I speak, 1 million Gazans have received the order to leave Gaza City so that Netanyahu can continue with his project of ethnic cleansing. And what did we do? Well, we just held a minute's silence. We Europeans have contributed to this crime. We've provided weapons to Italy. We haven't sanctioned Israel. We have turned away from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. We need sanctions now. We need an arms embargo. We need to isolate Israel on the international stage. The Palestinians don't need our minute of silence. They need us to take action. So let's do it.
The next speaker is Katharina Martins.
Thank you, President. Ms. Kallas, this is genocide. This is not a conflict. It is genocide. 28 children per day. 28 children die per day in the Gaza Strip at the hands of the Israelis and everyone who's complicit. Israel has decided to kill through hunger in Israel. What we need is to support those who are trying to bring in humanitarian aid. I didn't hear anything about the flotilla with aid, the global flotilla. There was a vessel with a Portuguese flag. Greta Thunberg was on it, and so were others. But this vessel was hit by a drone. And this is how Israel acts. And what are you doing? What is von der Leyen doing? What is Metsola doing? What is Antonio Costa doing? Why aren't you condemning the attack on that vessel? Why are you not protecting this flotilla which is providing aid? Why are you not protecting those who are doing what we should be doing, which is providing humanitarian aid, getting it into Gaza? If you are silent, then you are complicit. Israel is killing with European money, European means and European arms. Silence is also genocide.
Commissioner Kallas, två palestinska terrorister.
Madam Kallas, 2 Palestinian terrorists yesterday carried out a further cold-blooded attack where they murdered innocent people on a bus in Jerusalem. At least 6 people died, and many others, including a highly pregnant woman on her way to work, are seriously injured. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are celebrating terror, and they are training at a rapid pace tomorrow's terrorists to kill more innocent bus passengers. All the evil Western world is accusing Israel, and it's Israel that has to subjugate itself, according to naive Westerners who don't understand that we're next on the list. The EU has to clarify that there's no peace if you are trying to negotiate with a death cult. Nobody can carry out acts where they are paying terrorists who die in attacks, like the Palestinian government is. Israel has to defeat Hamas. If it doesn't, there will be more terrorist attacks until Israel is no longer there.
1 minute.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Chair, dear colleagues, 17 years ago, I took part in a school exchange in Israel with people from various religions. They said, we want something like your EU, 2 states, 2 diverse states, but this dream has exploded. Terror organisation Hamas is slaughtering Jewish people to the largest extent since the Holocaust. Families are being riven, lives are being lost, there is famine. Civil society on both sides is bleeding out due to Hamas and due to Netanyahu's administration. We see you, Israeli civil society. We support you. We're by your side. Your protests should not stop against the war against Netanyahu. My Europe stands up for rule of law. We don't stand up for silence. We must act. There can be no taboos or barriers. Immediately release all hostages. Immediately proclaim a ceasefire and immediately bring an end to the humanitarian blockade.
Is Marcos Quarta.
A Gaza non ha...
We're not seeing a conflict anymore in Gaza, but the gradual annihilation of an entire population. Children killed, sick mothers, hospitals collapsed. Images that cannot be justified in the name of defence. Hamas remains a terrorist organisation. The 7th of October left an indelible wound. The hostages should be immediately released, but we cannot accept that the response becomes one of collective punishment. Italy, with Food for Gaza, has shown that solidarity can be rolled out in concrete terms. Tons of aid sent, children welcomed and cared for. It's something which Europe has to follow up on. We need one single, decisive, authoritative voice calling for a ceasefire, the protection of civilians and the release of all hostages. Only a strong Europe can contribute to lasting peace, with 2 people living in 2 states, free and safe, with dignity and with humanity.
Ignacio Roberto Marino.
I visited Birkenau and Auschwitz with Sami Modiano, who was deported there at the age of 13 and lost there his father and his young sister. I visited Hiroshima, a museum that shows tragedy and destruction. I will not live long enough to visit the Museum of the Destruction of Gaza and to hear the voices of my great-grandchildren asking, but where was great-grandfather in those years? How could this have happened? You, High Representative Kallas, thanks to your young age, you will still be there. And you will need to change the subject or hide, because you will not be able to explain to your grandchildren how, in a position of power representing Europe, you did not do the impossible to stop those shooting to children begging for water and bread, nor did you raise your voice when your president called to express solidarity to a war criminal who, in your silence, carried out a genocide.
The next speaker is Kathleen Fanchen.
We are now more than 700 days into Israel's genocide in Gaza, and the response from world leaders, including those here in Europe, continues to be one of shameful, resounding silence. More than 64,000 people murdered was not enough for President von der Leyen to say stop. And it seems that the images of enforced starvation of children is not enough for the Commission and the Council to take real action against Israel. The EU and all Member States must suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement, ban trade with illegal settlement and finally work towards the delivery of a two-state solution where all children can live without hunger and without fear of Israeli bombs falling from the sky. I do want to comment on some of the comments we heard here today from people in this chamber who are denying the genocide. I ask, how can you watch children being shredded to pieces by Israeli weapons and do nothing and deny the genocide? History will not forgive silence. Never again means never again for everyone. Sirta on Palestine.
Freedom for Palestine.
From Tomislav Sokol, please, Mrs. Fanchen. There is a blue card. Do you accept the blue card? Tomislav Sokol.
Thank you very much. So you speak about genocide all the time, you and the other colleagues from the left. My question is, are you aware of a statement signed by almost 500 legal and history scholars, which, with very strong arguments, say that there is no genocide in Gaza? So are you also aware of that, or you just plan to not hear this because it doesn't suit your narrative? Thank you very much.
The first thing I want to say is I will call out a genocide wherever it happens. Wherever there is a genocide, it will be called out by me. We know very well in Ireland what it's like to be under occupation, so that is why we have such empathy, rightly so, with the Palestinian people. It's already been stated by my colleague Mark Botenga, all of the various organisations, the International Court of Justice, Amnesty, all of the organisations, the list is as long as your arm, that know that this is a genocide. You are the one that is denying a genocide, and history will not look well on you at all, and rightly so. And shame on you to look at kids starving, enforced starvation, trucks and boats trying to get in with food and aid, and you sit there and you laugh. Shame on you.
30 seconds for answer. As we are already late, I have to close the Catch the Eye now, and we gave already a lot of colleagues the blue card, and we have already a lot of demands for Catch the Eye, so the blue card is closed now, the Catch the Eye is closed, and I give the floor to Sean Kelly, please.
Here we are again, debating the undebatable. Colleagues will defend what is indefensible, and we will be here until Netanyahu achieves his goal, total destruction of Gaza. Words cannot do justice to the human indignity that Netanyahu's enforced famine imposes on innocent Gazans. It's just heartbreaking to see young children with a bowl in their hands begging for food every day. Netanyahu has also created a deadliest period for journalists in contemporary history. A generation of accountability is being wiped out, granting Netanyahu carte blanche to starve, kill and destroy. As we speak, Gaza is on its knees and Israel bombards Gaza City. Meanwhile, activists like Kitty O'Brien face police brutality for standing against these atrocities. We cannot give up on a two-state solution. We cannot stand idle against annexation, and we cannot stand by violence when peace is possible. Free the hostages and free Gaza.
Speaker is Lucia Annunziata.
Parlerò intanto del perché I'm going to be speaking to why it's important to defend the Palestinians right now. The first reason is that this is a people who has been suffering since 1948, and it continues. Secondly, this war isn't a solution, not even for Israel. 2 years on from bringing its full military force to bear on a small territory, the Israeli government is continuing to state that it's not managed yet to neutralise Hamas. It's a defeat. Peace for Israel has to take a different path to that. And that's being called for by the families of the hostages and those many civilians who are coming out against Netanyahu. Peace can be achieved by being clear, even here as well. It's impossible to do nothing and to do very little, and that's the whole point why we should be talking about genocide. Even if we weren't to use that word, it would change very little, as several people have said. S&D has decided that we will pronounce this word, and it's to come out of the deadlock that we have to talk about that genocide today.
Speaker is Carola Rackete.
As of now, at least 2,361 Palestinians have died of malnutrition, and more than 2,000 were murdered trying to reach food distribution. Everyone in the world with a smartphone can see images of starving people, starving children on their phones. It is heartbreaking and disgusting to watch, and it is impossible to talk about this famine without talking about the intent of Israel. It's genocide. It is disgusting to watch because the European Commission, European governments like the German one, and also many people here in the room are still choosing to be complicit instead of doing the obvious thing, impose sanctions, suspend the association agreement, and stop selling weapons to kill defenseless people who have lived in an open-air prison for decades. We are living and shaping a historic moment when international cooperation falls apart on so many levels, but everyone here has a choice, and the Commission has a choice to fulfill your obligation to prevent genocide.
The next is Wouter Beke.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen. Madam Kallas, 6,000 dead people has led us to this discussion, but 5 weeks ago we were talking about the war in Gaza then as well. And then we asked, when's this going to stop? 6,000 deaths ago. When is Europe finally going to move into action? When are we finally going to suspend the association agreement, put Israel under pressure, carry out that ban on exports from the occupied territories and impose visa bans? This has to stop. Some states, including Belgium, are taking initiatives, but Europe as such is turning a deaf ear to what's going on. Europe must assume some moral responsibility, and in order to do that, they have to act now. They're doing it with Ukraine. We have to do that with the horror that's going on in Gaza. Madam President, Madam Kallas, assume your responsibilities, take action, and make sure that next month we don't have to be back here discussing that another 5,000 people have died.
The next speaker is Evin Insir.
Refusing to acknowledge a genocide doesn't make it less of a genocide. Refusing to call a starvation for a starvation doesn't make it less of a starvation. Refusing to name an occupation doesn't make it less of an occupation. International law is not a matter of left and right. It's a matter of principle. But the reality is undeniable. For over a year in this European Parliament, there has been a right-wing majority that has refused to name atrocities for what they are and has been even less willing to act. You have the possibility to now to show that you can spell to humanity through joining us in our demands for action and to call a spade a spade. For how many more Palestinians must die before international law is enforced? How many more children must cease to see the daylight? Tell me how many. Freeze the EU-Israeli Association Agreement, adopt EU-wide weapon embargoes, sanction the criminal government of Israel, implement ICC, ICJ decisions, recognize Palestine. Shame on this current silence. Shame on hypocrisy. Shame on the inactions. Shame, shame, shame.
The next speaker is Tomislav Sokol.
Islamic fundamentalists are the evil of today, from northern Africa, from the Middle East to our continent. Jews and Christians are victims of a totalitarian criminal ideology. It happened with Israel, be deleted, as well as its nation. For everything that's happening is
collectively and collectively and individually. We're talking about values, but we're accepting the systematic trampling on of human rights. Children in Gaza are condemned to famine. People are queuing for food and being shot at, and there is continuous bombing of health services. We've applied financial sanctions to Russia, but we failed to suspend the association agreement with Israel. We've not broken the trade with the settlements. We recognise all of the signs that the genocide is ongoing in Gaza, but we don't want to raise our voice. How is it feasible for Europe to act like this? We said no more, but now we are standing by. We've lost moral authority. We've lost credibility vis-à-vis our citizens and third countries. As you did in Ukraine, High Representative, do likewise. Call on the EU to be on the right side of history once more in Gaza. Demand an immediate ceasefire, the entry of food aid and a two-state solution.
The next speaker is Lucas Mander.
Thank you very much. First, I want to make the remark that also during this war and after this war, we in this chamber have to talk to each other also on different matters. This is why I advocate for a bit of a de-escalation in the language. I hear shame, shame, shame all the time and things like that. I think this is not the way to deal with it. Secondly, the whole mess has been started by the Iranian regime. I'm very happy, Madame Kallas, that we have you here and not your predecessor during these times and generally, but I also want to remind you that the Iranian regime is very much aligned with the Russian regime at the moment, and these are those who fight the political West, which we are supposed to defend, I think. The Iranian regime might already regret this attack, but it's still there, as well as Hamas is also still there. Usually we're against political Islam, we are against Islamistic terrorism. Usually we are for democracy. Israel is a vibrant democracy, and of course I'm very much in favor of supplying help to Gaza, and I very much recognize that Israel itself is also supplying help to Gaza. And I'm not against a two-state solution. I'm for a two-state solution, but after a long process of de-weaponization of the Palestinian territories.
The next speaker is Céline Imar.
Madame la Haute Représentante.
Madam High Representative, 730 days since Hamas tore people away from their towns during an unprecedented attack. 730 days of unbearable anxiety for the children. And we've been raising the same call from my colleagues in the EPP, the immediate release of all hostages, which is crucial to all negotiations. However, certain countries over these days have chosen to recognise the state of Palestine, but the conditions aren't there, because it's by in recognising the state of Palestine we'll be validating the 7th of October attacks. That has to be looked at into after the release of the Israeli hostages, with adequate humanitarian aid and food aid to the population in Gaza. We need a ceasefire. Europe cannot negotiate under the threat of arms. A two-state solution needs to be negotiated, but building that in the middle of chaos is crazy, and it would undermine the credibility and the unity of Europe. It's now not up to good feelings and diplomacy. We have to mobilise our energy for a single priority, and that is the release of the hostages and the end of suffering for all civilians. Thank you.
And as we don't have too much time, because also the High Representative has to have some speaking time, I cannot give all the demands the floor. So the first is Nina Carberry. 1 minute.
Genocide, famine, war. The EU was formed on the promise that we would stop such atrocities from happening again. Yet the people of Gaza are dying in their tens of thousands. I've said it before in this chamber, Israel must end its siege. Military operations must cease. Aid must flow freely. It is unacceptable that the Commission and the European Council have failed to take action. More than 18 months on from Ireland and Spain calling for the review of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, that agreement must be suspended. Israel must be held accountable. We need a ceasefire, the release of all hostages and the unrestricted aid flow now. Thank you.
The next speaker under Catch the Eye is Daniel Attard.
Colleagues, after the horrors of the Second World War, our forefathers said never again. Yet, today, in Gaza, genocide is unfolding before our eyes. This is not anti-Semitism. This is the declared policy of Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich and their extremist government. We present ourselves as the guardians of international law. Yet when political conviction clashes with convenience, when human dignity clashes with commercial interests, we compromise. We look away. So let us act, because every day we allow the Israel Association Agreement, every day we allow trade and arms to flow, we betray the promise of never again. Because, colleagues, never again must mean something, or else it would mean nothing at all. Thank you.
The next speaker is Oyana Aguirre Goita Martinez.
I'm fed up of going back to the Basque Country week after week, having to hear about people murdering and starving civilians and children. People are saying, look, the EU isn't doing anything. I'm fed up of hearing this. There's no agreement, but that's no cop whatsoever. We must shoulder our responsibilities and see precisely how we can act. We could sign up with a trade agreement with the US, but we can't make we can't bring any political or economic pressure to bear on Israel. How does that work? And the leaders of the European institutions and the leaders of the groups talk, but they are ignoring the protests going on throughout Europe. It's easy to find articles pointing out how we should comply with human rights, comply with European and international law and the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights. People on the street don't understand treaties. They don't know why we aren't being punished here as MEPs. People want immediate action.
Ana Miranda Paz.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Señora Kallas. Thank you very much indeed. Mrs. Kallas, recently you made a few statements saying that you felt frustration at the genocide in Gaza. You didn't use the word genocide, but a lot of people are using that word who are fed up of seeing children being killed. I want to express all my solidarity with those people demonstrating across the face of Europe, including in my own country, where to stand up and demonstrate, they have been attacked by the police as well. And I'm going to say it in public. This is a world it's turned on its head. What world are we living in? If we're talking about genocide, we're arrested. I feel frustrated. Europe is committing a major error, but I will not stop fighting until this genocide comes to an end. I'm from Galicia, and basically every kilometre on our roads there recognise of the 18,000 the 6,000 kilometres represents one child who has been killed. We can't accept this. But from here, I would like to express my full solidarity with the Palestinians.
Özlem Demirel.
Dankeschön, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, Madam President. The CDU member, Ms. Benteler, stood up here and, in all seriousness, maintained that Israel can find a military solution to the Middle East conflict. I can say this very clearly. Israel is not resolving anything at the moment. Israel is committing a genocide that's being live-streamed, and getting applause from the Conservative side of this House is unacceptable. What Ms. Bentel is doing is maybe less important, but what you, Ms. Kallas, do, and Mr. Merz and others who have given the green light for this attack. The Freedom Flotilla has been attacked. That's illegal. The blockade of Gaza is illegal. Why are you not saying anything? Why aren't you condemning this? There needs to be justice for Palestinians. There needs to be peace for Palestinians. You are using your double standards that nobody in this world accepts anymore. Please understand that now. History will condemn you, Ms. Kallas, and they will condemn everybody who've supported this.
Ich möchte hier noch mal darauf hinweisen.
Maybe I can just point out that every member of this House has the same significance and importance. The final speaker under Catch the Eye is Lucas Sieper.
Hohes Haus.
Distinguished colleagues, long before this war, which has been dragging on for so many decades, before the latest round of conflict started, there were a host of trials and demonstrations within rule of law in Israel. These were aimed at combating the corruption of Benjamin Netanyahu. Possibly Benjamin Netanyahu was prompted to conduct a war to have this act as a smokescreen against this corruption. Hamas committed something terrible on the 17th of October. Israel is entitled, of course, to self-defense, but since then Netanyahu has trampled on international law. His far-right ministers and himself have pursued a policy which does not reflect the dignity of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration are the real enemies of Israel, and we should acknowledge that.
Close the Catch the Eye due to the time, and I give the floor to Kaja Kallas.
Honourable members, thank you for this debate. A few remarks. First, we have not been silent. I mean, on famine, we have a statement on the 22nd of August. We have been very, very clear about this. And it is, I mean, when I say that I'm frustrated that we can't do more. And this is what I'm constantly working on. And that's why, we are trying to improve the situation. If you think that I don't emphasize with the people, that I don't feel the suffering of the people, this is not true. I mean, that's why I work hard to really improve the situation and help the people on the ground. And there was the leader of the left here, MEP Aubrey and MEP Martins. Of course, both of them are not here when I respond, but I understand that the people of Europe don't know how Europe functions. So, you can point on one person and say that, why don't you do, this decision and everything works out well. Whereas the MEPs, especially leaders of the groups, should know how Europe functions. We are not run by executive orders. We are run by collective decision making, which means that we have 27 countries in the Council, and even as we have proposed measures that require qualified majority, we don't have that. So work with the member states of yours. I was hearing many member states, representatives of member states here work with them so that they would also agree to these decisions, and really also the Commission. I mean, we are rendering decisions by consensus, and we have also those member states represented in the Commission. So you can point the fingers at me, but I really assure you I try to do my best to improve the situation on the ground, and I will remain in contact with my counterpart in Israel, because I'm also raising all these difficult issues that you are saying here. And I also urge you to call your Israeli counterparts and say that you don't approve this situation. Also to address the difficult questions we have. Of course, we must be calling for a permanent ceasefire and release of hostages. The EU is committed to supporting the two-state solution. This is where we are united, and we will continue the work. So I don't agree with MEP Demirel that I've given a green light for what Israel is doing. That is not true. I mean, I've raised every time all these issues with the Israeli counterpart to do, but I urge you to also learn how European Union functions. Here you could see also the division amongst the member states. This is the same that I'm up against in the Council and in the College. I haven't been silent at all, but I'm not yelling maybe as you are yelling, so I haven't been silent at all. We have had strong statements, and of course, like I said, we try to do more every day, and I urge you to support us in this endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have received 7 motions for resolution to wind up this debate, and the debate is closed now. The vote will be held on Thursday. The sitting is now suspended. It will resume in a few minutes with the address by Maia Sandu, President of the Republic of Moldova. Thank you very much.